Let's talk about the suspension settings available on the Losi LMT and how to tune it to get it dialed for your situation. The Losi LMT comes out of the box with a pretty good setup for all types of use, but there are a lot of adjustments built into the suspension that will allow you to fine tune it for your specific situation. If you're going to race, for example, you'll want to go one direction, and if you're going to do freestyle runs, then you'll probably want to go another direction. Ride height is the distance between the bottom of the chassis and the ground, and it's adjusted on the LMT in two different ways. The ride height can be adjusted through the holes in the chassis and or through the preload collars on the shocks. The mounting holes in the chassis give you a set ride height position, while the preload collars allow for fine adjustment of ride height once the position in the chassis has been chosen. You could raise ride height to get more ground clearance, but that increases the center of gravity, and that makes the truck less stable. You can lower the truck's ride height, and that'll give you a lower center of gravity, which will increase stability, but that also makes less ground clearance, so you're possibly going to hit things while you're driving the truck around. If you raise the front more than the rear, it'll increase rear grip on power and decrease steering, and then having the front lower than the rear will increase steering and reduce rear grip. The springs are basically there to support the weight of the chassis, and the LMT comes with a 1.1 pound spring in front and a 1.6 pound spring in the rear, and that's a great starting point for people running a 3S setup. If you add weight to the chassis, you may want to increase the spring rate, and if you remove weight from the chassis, then you may want to decrease the spring rate. For example, I don't run a 3S battery in my truck, I run a 2S battery, and so therefore, because of the reduced amount of weight in the rear, I was able to go with the lighter 1.1 pound spring. Light damping, a softer spring, allows more weight transfer and therefore can increase front or rear grip, and a stiffer spring can decrease front or rear grip. A stiffer spring can also reduce the chances of the chassis bottoming out after a big jump. Shock angle happens at the top of the shock, and the mounting position of the chassis is where you adjust this. A shock that is vertical will have the same feel from beginning of the stroke to the end. The more you angle the shock back towards the center line, the softer it will feel during its initial compression, but as the shock is compressed, the stiffness will increase. This has to do with the shock actually kind of straightening out as the suspension compresses. The sway bar controls how much a chassis sways from side to side. A light sway bar allows for more weight to transfer, which increases traction in the turns, while a stiffer sway bar will reduce weight transfer and decrease traction in the turns. A great thing about the LMT sway bar is that it's basically infinitely adjustable and it's quick and easy to do. If you bend or break one of the stock bars, you can replace them or get a different material. You can change the thickness of the material, or you can even change the length of the bar itself. All these adjustments allow you to easily fine-tune the truck for what you're going to do with it. On my race truck, for example, I run a spring steel sway bar, and I made the flat go from end to end so I can adjust them as long or as short as I want depending on the conditions. The upper link position is how high or low the upper link is mounted in the chassis, and this adjustment is mainly used in the rear of the truck. The upper position sets the 4 link bars parallel to each other, and that gives the truck maximum rear grip under acceleration. Lowering the upper link will reduce rear grip. Now don't go making all kinds of adjustments to your suspension at one time. Make one change at a time and see what that does before moving on to the next. Too many adjustments at one time can be bad because you never know which adjustment worked and which one didn't.